Everyone abandoned the paralyzed Italian mafia boss in the middle of the ballroom, but only the rejected chubby woman saw the black leather strap cutting into his leg. That was the part no one wanted to admit afterward. They had all been close, enough to notice. The men in black suits, the elegant women in diamonds, the old family allies pretending not to panic, the cousins who carried the Moretti name like a crown. The wives who had spent the evening whispering about his wheelchair while smiling whenever he looked their way. They all saw Don Alessio Moretti's right leg slip from its brace. They all heard the small metallic crack beneath the music. They all watched his hand tighten around the armrest of his black wheelchair until the veins rose against his skin. But no one moved, not because they did not understand. They understood too well. Alessio Moretti did not allow pity. He did not ask for help. He did not forgive humiliation, and he had built such a terrifying silence around his injury that even the people who loved his power were afraid to touch his pain. So the ballroom froze beneath the chandeliers. The string quartet kept playing, uncertain and soft. Champagne. Glasses hovered near painted lips. Men looked at other men, silently begging someone else to act first. Women widened their eyes, horrified by the public discomfort, but not brave enough to cross the marble floor. At the center of it all, Alessio sat motionless in his wheelchair, wearing an all-black Italian suit, a gold watch, and the expression of a man who would rather bleed through his expensive trousers than let anyone see him need. Across the room, Isabella Romano saw everything. She was used to seeing what others ignored. At 34, she had spent most of her life in corners, at back tables, beside service doors, behind prettier women, beside louder relatives, close enough to be useful, but never important enough to be introduced properly. Her body had always entered rooms before her name did. Chubby, soft-armed, round-faced, with wide hips and a gentle smile people mistook for permission to underestimate her. Tonight she wore a silver gown she had rented from a bridal shop in Queens, a gown that fit beautifully when she stood still but tightened when she breathed too deeply. Her cousin Livia had told her it looked brave, which was society's cruelest compliment for a woman who did not look like a model. Isabella had come to the Moretti charity gala because Livia had begged her to help with last-minute alterations. Livia was supposed to present herself to Alessio's family as a possible future bride, or at least as a woman suitable for the Moretti circle. Livia had the face for it. Tall, thin, perfect black dress, red lips, collarbones like jewelry. Isabella had the emergency sewing kit, the safety pins, the stain wipes, the spare stockings, and the quiet loyalty of a woman trained to make other women shine. She had not come to be noticed. In fact, she had prayed not to be. Earlier that evening, Livia had stood near the grand staircase and laughed with 3 women in black silk while Isabella knelt behind her, fixing the torn hem of her dress. "You are a miracle, Bella," Livia had said without looking down. Then one of the women asked, "Is she your assistant?" Livia hesitated only half a second. "Something like that." Isabella felt the word strike but kept her eyes on the needle. Something like that. Not cousin, not family, not the woman who had stayed up until 2 a.m. hand-beating Livia's sleeves because the designer had made a mistake. Something like that. Isabella had smiled because she had learned that if a woman like her did not smile, people called her bitter. That was before the strap cracked, before the music trembled. Before Don Alessio Moretti, the most feared Italian mafia boss on the East Coast, sat trapped in his own pride while every loyal person in the room abandoned him with their eyes. Isabella looked at his leg. The brace was custom, black leather, and polished steel hidden beneath the expensive fabric of his trousers and high boots. Most people would not recognize the mechanism. Isabella did. Her father had worn one after the factory accident that damaged his hip. Not as elegant, not as expensive, but similar enough. She had spent years fastening straps, adjusting buckles, learning how pain hid in the angle of a knee. When a brace slipped, waiting made it worse. If the strap tightened around the wrong nerve, the pain would burn upward fast. If the leg twisted, the spasms could make a proud man lose control in front of everyone. Alessio's jaw was clenched now. A muscle jumped near his cheek. His bodyguard stood behind him, frozen because they knew the rule. No one touched the dawn unless he ordered it. His cousin Marco leaned close and whispered something. Alessio did not answer. His mother, Signora Valentina Moretti, stood near the dining arch, her pearl necklace shining against her black gown, her face pale with fury at the room's cowardice and fear of her son's pride. She took one step forward. Alessio's eyes cut to her. She stopped. That single glance was enough. Everyone stayed where they were. Isabella's hands went cold. She told herself not to move. This was not her world. These people were dangerous. Men like Alessio Moretti did not appreciate strangers kneeling near their legs in front of 300 guests. If she embarrassed him, he could destroy her life with a sentence. He could have her removed. He could humiliate her worse than any woman in that room ever had. But then she saw his fingers tremble, not from weakness, from pain, from the terrible effort of refusing to show it. Something inside Isabella broke. Maybe it was memory. Her father gritting his teeth at the kitchen table while her mother pretended not to hear him because he had begged them both never to fuss. Maybe it was anger. At all those beautiful, loyal, polished people standing around like concern was a stain that might ruin their gowns. Maybe it was simply the fact that Isabella had spent her life being treated as disposable, and disposable people often learned the most useful kind of courage. She crossed the ballroom. At first, no one understood what she was doing. Then the what whispers began. Who is that? What is she doing? Isn't that Livia's cousin? Someone stop her. Livia turned and saw Isabella moving toward the center of the room. Her face went white. Bella, she hissed. Bella, no. Isabella kept walking. Alessio looked up when her shadow reached the marble near his chair. His eyes were dark, almost black, and sharp enough to make her forget every word she had ever known. Up close, he was more intimidating than handsome, though he was certainly that too. Thick dark hair swept back from a strong forehead, trimmed beard, mouth set in a hard line, shoulders broad under the tailored suit. The wheelchair did not make him look smaller. It made the danger around him feel contained, like a knife folded closed. Move away, he said. His voice was quiet. The room heard it anyway. Isabella swallowed. Your brace slipped. His eyes hardened. I know. Then you know it's cutting into the nerve. A flicker crossed his face. Surprise, maybe. Irritation. Pain. I said move away. Behind him, one of his guards stepped forward. Alessio lifted 2 fingers. The guard stopped. Isabella felt hundreds of eyes on her back. Her heart was beating so hard she thought she might faint. But his leg had shifted another inch, and the leather strap was now pulled at a brutal angle. She knew that angle. She knew what came next. If I move away, she said softly, you will either pass out from the pain or your leg will spasm in front of everyone. A collective breath moved through the ballroom. No one spoke to Alessio Moretti like that, especially not a rejected chubby woman in a rented silver gown. Alessio's eyes narrowed. Who are you? No one important. That is not a name. Isabella Romano. At the name, something changed in the faces around them. Romano was respectable, but not powerful. Her uncle owned a restaurant supply company. Her cousin Livia had been invited because the Romanos had helped the Morettis years ago with a warehouse dispute, and because Livia was beautiful enough for old women to call her promising. Isabella was not supposed to be part of the negotiation. She was background. Alessio studied her face. Do you understand what you are asking? Yes. Do you understand who I am? Yes. Then why are you still standing here? Isabella looked down at the brace, then back at him. Her voice dropped low enough that only he and the people closest could hear. Because everyone who claims to serve you is afraid of your pride, and your pride is not the thing bleeding. The silence became absolute. Alessio stared at her. For 1 second, she thought he would have her thrown out. Maybe worse. Then, his hand relaxed by the smallest measure on the armrest. It was not permission exactly. It was not refusal either. Isabella took it for what it was, lowered herself carefully to her knees, and reached for the lower strap of his brace. Gasps broke around them. Livia whispered, "Oh my God." A woman covered her mouth. Marco Moretti cursed under his breath. Alessio looked straight ahead, face made of stone, but Isabella could see the pulse beating in his throat. "Do not touch the steel hinge," he said. "I know. You know. My father wore a brace after an accident. Not like this one. But enough." Her fingers found the first buckle. The leather was tight. Too tight. Whoever had fastened it earlier had done it with fear, not care. Afraid to touch him too long. Afraid to ask if the pressure was right. Afraid of the man more than concerned for the body carrying him. Isabella loosened the strap slowly. Alessio inhaled once through his nose. Not a gasp. Not a sound of relief. But she felt the tension change beneath her hands. "Better?" she asked. "Continue." One word. Command and trust tangled together. She adjusted the second strap, then the angle of the boot. The room watched in stunned silence as the rejected woman no one had introduced properly knelt at the feet of the most dangerous man in New York and did what his own men had not dared to do. It was not romantic. Not yet. It was too practical. For romance. Too intimate for strangers. Too human for a room that had turned power into theater. Isabella kept her eyes on the brace because if she looked at the faces around her, she might lose the courage to finish. "Who fastened this?" she asked. Marco stiffened. Alessio's gaze flicked to him. "My aide." "He pulled the lower strap wrong," Marco said sharply. "Careful." Isabella did not look up. "I am being careful. That is why I mentioned it." A sound came from Signora Valentina. It might have been a laugh. Alessio's mouth did not move, but his eyes shifted toward Isabella with something dangerously close to interest. She adjusted the final buckle, then slid 2 fingers under the strap to check the pressure. "There," she said. "It will hold until you can leave privately and have it fitted properly." She began to rise, but her knee caught the edge of her gown. For a terrible moment she wobbled. A few people tittered. Before the laugh could fully form, Alessio's hand closed around her wrist. Firm, warm, controlled. He steadied her without looking away from her face. The laughter died unborn. Isabella froze. No one touched her in public unless they were moving her aside. No man had ever steadied her as if her dignity mattered. Alessio released her only after she was standing. "Thank you," he said. 2 words, spoken quietly, but in that room, they carried more force than applause. Isabella's face burned. "You're welcome." Livia rushed forward then, panic hidden under a bright smile. "Don Moretti, I am so sorry. Bella can be impulsive. She means well, but she doesn't always understand boundaries." Isabella looked down. Of course. Here came the correction. The smoothing, the apology for her existence. Livia touched Isabella's arm, nails pressing too hard. "Come on, Bella. Let's not make this more uncomfortable." Alessio's gaze dropped to Livia's hand on Isabella's arm. "Let go of her." Livia froze. Her smile faltered. "I'm sorry?" "You heard me." Slowly, Livia released her. Alessio turned his chair slightly. The movement smooth now, that the brace was secure. His eyes moved over Livia in her black dress. The perfect hair. The perfect face. The practiced concern. Then back to Isabella, flushed and breathing too quickly. Silver gown slightly wrinkled from kneeling. One curl, loose against her cheek. "You came here with her?" he asked Isabella. "Yes." "As what?" Livia answered quickly. "My cousin. She was helping me tonight." Alessio did not look at her. "I asked Isabella." Isabella swallowed. "I came to fix her dress if anything happened." Something happened. not to her dress. For one brief second, Alessio Moretti's eyes almost smiled. Almost. The room felt it, and the shock of it moved like electricity. Signora Valentina stepped closer, studying Isabella with a sharpness that made her want to straighten her shoulders. You knew how to adjust the brace. A little. You did not faint. No, ma'am. You did not ask for permission from frightened men. Isabella was not sure how to answer that. There wasn't time. Valentina looked at her son. There is your answer. Alessio's face closed. Not here. Yes, here, his mother said. I am old. I prefer not to waste evenings. Marco stepped forward. Signora, with respect, this is not the moment. Valentina turned her eyes on him. You stood behind my son while a stranger helped him breathe. Do not instruct me on moments. Marco went silent. Isabella looked between them, confused and increasingly aware that she had stepped into something larger than a medical emergency. Alessio's jaw tightened. Mother. Valentina lifted her chin. You wanted to know who in this room could stand beside a Moretti without trembling at the wrong things. Now you know. The whispers erupted again. Livia's face drained of color. Isabella's stomach dropped. No, she said before she could stop herself. Every eye turned to her. Alessio looked at her sharply. No? Isabella realized, too late, that she had just refused a mafia matriarch in front of half the Italian families in New York. She gripped her own hands to hide their shaking. I mean, respectfully, no. I did not come here to stand beside anyone. I only helped because he was in pain. Valentina's eyes narrowed, not with anger, but curiosity. And if helping him made you powerful? Isabella gave a small, sad smile. Powerful people don't kneel in rented dresses while everyone whispers. Alessio's expression changed, just slightly. Enough that Isabella saw it. Pain recognized pain. Not the same kind, but pain all the same. Before anyone could speak, a man near the back of the ballroom laughed, not loudly, but ugly enough to stain the silence. Maybe that is what Moretti needs now, he said. A nurse instead of a wife. Several people turned toward him in horror. The man was Carlo Vescari, a rival cousin from another branch of the family, handsome in a cruel way, drunk on champagne and resentment. Careful, Marco warned. Carlo lifted both hands. What? We are all thinking it. First, he cannot stand, without a chair. Now he needs a girl twice the size of the others to buckle his boots. The room froze. Isabella felt the insult hit her body before her mind could form words. Twice the size. She had heard variations of it all her life, in school hallways, in dressing rooms, at weddings, from women who called it concern, and men who called it a joke. But somehow, hearing it in front of Alessio made it worse. She stepped back. I should go. Alessio's hand moved to the wheel of his chair. The motion was small. The effect was not. Every Moretti guard in the room straightened. Carlo, Alessio said. Carlo's smile faltered. Cousin, it was only... Come here. Carlo looked around, searching for someone to laugh with him. No one did. Slowly, he approached. Alessio looked up at him from the chair, and yet somehow Carlo seemed smaller. Apologize to her. Carlo blinked. To who? Alessio's voice went soft. Do not make me repeat myself. Carlo's face reddened. I apologize if she was offended. Alessio stared at him. That was not an apology. That was a coward asking grammar to protect him. A few people lowered their eyes. Isabella's breath caught. Alessio turned his head. Isabella. She looked at him despite herself. Do you accept his apology? No one had ever asked her that. People insulted women like her, then expected quick forgiveness so everyone else could feel comfortable again. Isabella looked at Carlo. His mouth was tight, his eyes angry, his apology rotten before it reached her. "No," she said quietly. Another silence. Alessio nodded once. "Good." Carlo went pale. Alessio looked to Marco. "Remove him." Carlo laughed nervously. "You are joking." Marco seized his arm. "He is not." Carlo began to protest, but 2 guards were already moving him toward the doors. The ballroom watched in stunned disbelief as a man from a powerful family was dragged out for insulting a woman most of them had dismissed an hour earlier. Isabella could not move. Livia looked sick with fury. Valentina smiled as if dinner had improved. Alessio turned his chair toward Isabella again. "You will sit with us." It was not a question. Isabella's first instinct was to refuse. Her second was to run. Her third, strange and quiet, was to stay. "I don't belong at your table," she said. Alessio's eyes held hers. Neither did most people invited to it. He gestured to the empty chair beside his mother. "Sit." The music resumed, slowly, but the room had changed. People watched Isabella cross to the Moretti table, not as an assistant, not as a joke, not as Livia's chubby cousin, but as the woman Don Alessio Moretti had defended in public. Her knees still trembled when she sat. Valentina poured her water with her own hand. "Drink." Isabella obeyed. Alessio watched her over the rim of his glass. "Your father wore a brace?" She nodded. "After an accident at the docks." Something flickered in his eyes. "Which docks?" "Red Hook, years ago. He loaded cargo before the company closed." "His name?" "Giovanni Romano." Alessio went still. The change was subtle, but Valentina saw it. So did Marco, who had returned from removing Carlo. Isabella noticed last, because she was too busy trying not to spill the water. "What?" she asked. Alessio leaned back. "Giovanni Romano saved 3 of my men during the dock fire in 2009. Isabella's lips parted. "He never told me that. Men like him rarely tell the story where they are brave." Her throat tightened. Her father had died 2 years ago, quietly, after a long decline that emptied their savings and left Isabella with debts, memories, and a sewing machine that still smelled faintly of his cigar smoke. To hear this feared man speak his name with respect felt like someone lighting a candle in a room she thought was closed forever. "He was brave," she said, "and stubborn." Alessio's gaze dropped briefly to his own braced leg. "Those often arrive together." Before Isabella could answer, Livia approached the table with a smile so stiff it looked painful. "Don." "Moretti, Signora Moretti, I hope Bella has not been bothering you. She gets emotional about these things. Her father's illness was difficult." Isabella went cold. There it was again. The small knife disguised as explanation. Valentina looked at Livia. "Your cousin adjusted my son's brace while the rest of the ballroom behaved like furniture. I am not bothered." Livia's cheeks flushed. "Of course, I only meant," Alessio interrupted. "Why did you introduce her as your assistant?" Livia froze. "I didn't." "You did." Isabella closed her eyes. Alessio's voice remained calm. "Why?" Livia looked at Isabella, then back to him. It was a misunderstanding. Most cruelty is called that by the person holding the knife. Livia's smile disappeared. Isabella whispered, "Please don't." Alessio looked at her. Why? Because if he exposed Livia, the family would blame Isabella. Because women like Livia always found a way to make their shame someone else's fault. Because Isabella was tired. Because part of her still loved the cousin who used her and abandoned her and called her brave in that awful tone. But before she could answer, a waiter approached Alessio's side and bent low to whisper something. Alessio's expression did not change, but the room around him seemed to darken. Marco leaned in. Valentina's hand tightened on her glass. Isabella noticed the waiter's left cuff was damp, not with water. With something darker. Red-brown. Blood. The waiter stepped back too quickly. Isabella's eyes followed him. He moved toward the service corridor, one hand pressed near his ribs beneath his jacket. Alessio turned his head slightly. "What is—" "EL," he asked her. Isabella blinked. "Me? You saw something." She hesitated, then said, "The waiter is bleeding." Marco cursed and moved. The waiter bolted. Chaos erupted for the second time that night. Guards rushed toward the corridor. Guests screamed. Alessio's chair turned sharply, but the movement strained his newly adjusted brace. Isabella saw his body tense with pain and, without thinking, put one hand on the side of his chair to steady the angle. "Don't twist," she said. Alessio looked at her, startled by the command. Then, impossibly, he obeyed. A moment later, Marco returned, dragging the injured waiter back with 2 guards. The man had a knife wound in his side and terror in his eyes. He collapsed to his knees before Alessio. "Please," he gasped. "They made me do it." Marco gripped his collar. "Do what?" The waiter's eyes darted to Isabella. "Not him," he whispered. "Her." Isabella's blood went cold. Alessio's voice became deadly quiet. "Explain." The waiter swallowed. "They said the Romano woman would be easy to get near. The big one. The one no one watches. They said put the envelope in her bag before midnight." Livia's face turned white. Isabella stared. "What envelope?" The waiter shook his head, sobbing now. "I don't know. I swear. They gave it to Carlo Viscari." Alessio looked toward the doors where Carlo had been removed minutes earlier. Then his gaze moved to Isabella's silver purse lying on the table beside her untouched dessert. Marco picked it up carefully, opened it, and pulled out a sealed black envelope that had not been there before. Every breath in Isabella's body stopped. The room blurred. "That isn't mine," she whispered. Livia stepped back. "Bella, what did you do?" Isabella turned to her, stunned. "What?" Livia's face was full of fear, but beneath it, something else. Opportunity. "I told you not to get involved." The betrayal came so fast Isabella almost missed it. Almost. Alessio did not. His voice cut through the rising panic. "Enough." Marco handed him the envelope. Alessio opened it with a silver knife from the table. Inside was a photograph, a key card, and a note written in block letters. Alessio read it once, then again. His face became unreadable. Valentina whispered, "Alessio?" He looked at Isabella. "Someone planned to frame you for helping an assassin enter my private suite tonight." Isabella could not breathe. Around her, the ballroom erupted in shock. Livia covered her mouth, but her eyes were not on the envelope. They were on Alessio, measuring damage. Isabella stood too quickly. The chair scraped. "I didn't. I would. Never. I know." 2 words. Immediate. Certain. They stopped her panic more effectively than any explanation could have. She stared at him. "You know?" Alessio held her gaze. "You just risked public humiliation to stop my pain. Then you noticed blood on a waiter trained to hide it. You are many things, Isabella Romano, but careless is not one of them." Tears stung her eyes. She hated that, hated crying in front of the room. Alessio turned to Marco. "Lock every exit." The guards moved. Guests began protesting. Valentina rose from her chair, elegant and terrifying. "No one leaves this ballroom until my son knows which coward tried to use this woman as a weapon." Isabella looked around at the shocked faces, the frightened men, the jealous women, her cousin Livia trembling beside the table. An hour ago, no one had wanted to stand near her. Now, the entire room was trapped because of her. Alessio looked up at her from his wheelchair, not with suspicion, not with pity. With the same sharp attention he had given her when she loosened the strap cutting, into his leg. "Sit beside me," he said quietly. "Why?" she whispered. His eyes moved over the ballroom, then returned to her. Because whoever chose you thought no one would defend the woman everyone rejected. His hand rested on the armrest, strong, steady, waiting. They were wrong. Isabella sat, and for the first time that night, she did not feel like the rejected woman in the silver dress. She felt like the only person in the ballroom the Italian mafia boss trusted. The ballroom doors closed one by one, and the sound of each lock echoed through the marble hall like the end of mercy. Guests who had spent the evening smiling at criminals suddenly remembered fear. Men in tailored suits reached for phones that Moretti guards quietly took from their hands. Women clutched pearls, purses, husbands, anything that made them feel less exposed. The string quartet had stopped completely now. The only music left was the nervous breathing of 300 people, realizing Don Alessio Moretti had sealed them inside his world. Isabella Romano sat beside him at the head table with her silver gown wrinkled from kneeling, her bandaged pride burning hotter than her cheeks. The black envelope lay open in front of Alessio. The photograph inside showed the private elevator that led to his upstairs suite. The keycard carried the Bellamere Hotel crest. The note said exactly enough to destroy her if Alessio had been the kind of man who believed convenient lies. Plant the card. Blame the Romano woman. No one will question it. She is invisible enough. Isabella stared at those last words until they blurred. Invisible enough. Not pretty enough to be protected. Not important enough to be believed. Not connected enough for anyone to risk angering a powerful man on her behalf. She had heard the idea her whole life, though never written so plainly. Alessio picked up the note again. His face remained calm, but Isabella could see anger in the stillness of his shoulders. She had learned that from her father. Men who shouted were often less dangerous than men who went quiet. Valentina Moretti stood behind her son's chair, one hand resting on the carved back of Isabella's chair like a public declaration. She was not touching Isabella gently. She was placing her under Moretti protection. That made several people in the room swallow hard. Marco Moretti dragged the bleeding waiter to the center of the ballroom and forced him into a chair. A doctor, from among the guests, was ordered to keep him alive. Nothing more. Alessio looked at the man. Who gave you the envelope? The waiter's voice shook. Carlo Vescari. Where is Carlo? Marco answered. He was removed through the west corridor. My men are searching. Alessio turned his eyes slowly across the room. Someone helped him. No one spoke. Isabella felt Livia stiffen beside the table. Her cousin had not sat down. She stood a few feet away, too pale, one hand at her throat, her black dress glittering under the chandelier. Earlier, Livia had looked like a woman born for that room. Now she looked like a woman trying to escape her own reflection. I didn't know about any envelope, Livia said quickly. No one had accused her yet. That made the words worse. Valentina's eyes flicked toward her. Interesting thing, to deny before being asked. Livia's mouth opened, then closed. Isabella looked at her cousin and felt something painful tear inside her. She did not want Livia to be guilty. Not truly. Cruel, yes. Selfish, often. Ashamed of Isabella, clearly, but guilty of framing her for an assassin's access to Alessio's. Sweet. That was a bridge Isabella's heart did not know how to cross. Alessio turned to Isabella. Tell me what you saw before the waiter came to my table. The room watched them. Isabella's first instinct was to shrink, to say she didn't know, to let men with weapons solve it. But she remembered the leather strap cutting into Alessio's leg. She remembered everyone freezing. She remembered the note. Invisible enough. She placed both hands in her lap to steady them. He came from the service corridor, but he was breathing hard before he reached us. Not from running. From pain. Alessio nodded. Go on. His cuff was bloody. He tried to keep that side turned away from the guards, but he looked at my purse before he looked at you. Marco's eyes sharpened. You noticed that? Yes. A man from the back muttered, Convenient. Alessio did not turn his head. He lifted one finger. A guard stepped toward the man. The muttering stopped. Isabella continued, her voice stronger now. The envelope was already in my purse before he reached the table. He wasn't coming to plant it. He was coming to warn someone. The waiter lifted his head quickly, eyes wet with fear. Yes, signorina. I swear, I changed my mind. Marco grabbed his jaw. Why? Because they stabbed me when I said I wouldn't do it anymore. Who stabbed you? The waiter's eyes went to Livia. Isabella stopped breathing. Livia recoiled. No, absolutely not. The waiter shook his head. Not her. The man beside her earlier, tall, gray beard, red pocket square. Isabella turned slowly toward the guests. Several men wore dark suits. Only one wore a red pocket square. Vittorio Salvi. He was a wealthy importer, old friend of the Romanos, and one of the men who had kissed Livia's hand when she arrived. He stood near the champagne table with his wife, his face carefully blank. Alessio looked at him. Vittorio. Salvi smiled as if offended. Don Moretti, surely you are not taking the word of a wounded waiter and a seamstress over a family friend. Seamstress. The word was not an insult by itself. Isabella loved sewing. Her father had taught her to respect work done by hands. But Salvi used it the way others used fat, assistant, brave. A small word sharpened into a blade. Alessio's eyes darkened. Careful. Salvi lifted both hands. I only mean grief has made the girl dramatic. Her father died poor, did he not? Debt makes people desperate. Perhaps she planted the envelope herself and then pretended innocence. Isabella's stomach twisted. There it was, the old magic trick of cruel people. Accuse the person with the least power first. Livia whispered. Vittorio, stop. The whisper was soft, but Isabella heard fear in it. So did Alessio. He turned to Livia. What does he have over you? Livia's face crumpled for 1 second before she rebuilt it. Nothing. Valentina leaned in, voice like silk over steel. My dear, you are a poor liar for someone so practiced at performing. Livia's eyes filled. He promised to help my family. Isabella stood. What family? Your father's company is fine. Livia looked at her then, and the truth came out with humiliation attached. No, Bella, it isn't. My father has been borrowing for months. We owe Salvi nearly everything. Isabella stared at her. Why didn't you tell me? Livia laughed bitterly. And what would you have done? Sewn us out of debt? The words hit, but they did not cut as deeply as they would have an hour ago. Something had changed in Isabella. Maybe Alessio's trust. Maybe Carlo being dragged out. Maybe the note calling her invisible enough and awakening the part of her that was tired of proving she existed. No, she said. I would have told you not to sell me to cover it. Livia flinched. Salvi began moving toward the side door. Marco saw him and nodded once. 2 guards blocked his path. Alessio looked at Isabella again. Why use you? She knew the answer before anyone said it. Her voice came quietly. Because if the key card was found in Livia's purse, people would investigate carefully. She matters to them. If it was found in mine, everyone would believe I was desperate for attention, or money, or revenge. Salvi smiled coldly. An intelligent theory. No, Isabella said, turning toward him. A familiar one. The ballroom was silent now, not mocking, listening. It was a dangerous thing to be heard after years of being dismissed. It made Isabella's heart pound, harder than fear. Alessio spoke to Marco without looking away from Salvi. Search him. Salvi stiffened. You have no right. Alessio's voice was soft. I have every right I can enforce. Marco searched him with efficient hands. From Salvi's inner jacket pocket, he removed a small silver phone, a second hotel key card, and a folded receipt from a private medical supplier. Marco frowned and handed the receipt to Alessio. Alessio read it. Isabella saw his face change. Not surprise. recognition turning into something darker. "What is it?" she asked before she remembered she had no right. Alessio answered her anyway. "A duplicate order for a brace lock." Isabella looked down at his leg, the black leather brace she had adjusted, the hinge, the lower strap, the metallic crack beneath the music. Her mouth went dry. The strap didn't just slip. Alessio's hand closed over the paper. "No." Marco seized Salvi by the collar. "You tampered with his brace?" Salvi said nothing. His silence confessed. Rage moved through the Moretti men like a current. Valentina went pale, but her voice remained calm. "You put my son in pain in front of this room." Salvi swallowed. "It was only meant to humiliate him, to make him look weak. The envelope was insurance." Alessio's gaze burned through him. Insurance against whom? Salvi looked at Livia. The Romanos needed money. Carlo needed revenge. The Rossettis wanted access. Everyone wanted something. Isabella gripped the edge of the table. The plot was suddenly clear in pieces. Tamper with Alessio's brace. Force public humiliation. Use the chaos to slip a keycard into Isabella's purse. Later, when an assassin entered Alessio's private suite, blame the chubby cousin no one respected enough to defend. Make her look desperate, foolish, obsessed with the mafia boss she had touched in front of everyone. The perfect scapegoat. Invisible enough. Disposable. Enough. Alessio rolled his chair forward slightly. Salvi tried to step back, but Marco held him still. "You chose her," Alessio said. Salvi's face shone with sweat. "She was convenient." "No," Alessio said. "She was kind. You mistook that for weakness because men like you only understand kindness when you can use it." Isabella felt her eyes burn, not because she was sad. Because someone had finally described the trap accurately. Salvi tried one last smile. "Don Moretti, we can discuss terms." Alessio looked almost bored. "There are no terms for a man who attacks my body and frames an innocent woman." He looked at Marco. "Take him downstairs. Keep him alive. I want every name before dawn." Salvi began shouting as he was dragged away. His wife fainted elegantly into another woman's arms. No one moved to help quickly. Perhaps they were all thinking about what they had failed to do earlier. Livia stood trembling, tears slipping down her face. "Bella, I didn't know it would go this far." Isabella turned to her cousin. "How far did you think it would go?" Livia wiped at her tears. Salvi said Carlo would make a joke, that Alessio would be embarrassed, that you might be blamed for getting too close, but nothing dangerous. He said no one would truly hurt you. Isabella stared at her, stunned by the smallness of the confession. "You were willing to let me be humiliated." Livia covered her mouth. "I was desperate." "So was I when my father was dying," Isabella said. "I did not sell you." Livia broke then, sobbing. Once, Isabella would have stepped forward automatically. She would have wrapped her arms around Livia, smoothed her hair, whispered that everything would be all right, and taken some of the blame just to make the crying stop. This time she did not move. That felt cruel for 1 second. Then it felt like freedom. Valentina watched her with approval. Alessio watched her with something deeper. Livia whispered, "Do you hate me?" Isabella looked at the woman who had called her something like an assistant, the cousin who had let others laugh, the family who had decided Isabella's dignity was an acceptable price for survival. "Not yet," Isabella said softly. "But I am tired of loving people who survive by shrinking me." Livia flinched as if struck. Isabella sat back down because her legs were shaking. The ballroom remained sealed, but the energy had shifted. The danger had moved from Isabella to those who had underestimated her. Alessio turned his chair toward her. "You saved me twice tonight." She shook her head. "I adjusted a strap and noticed blood." Do not make courage sound small because you are uncomfortable owning it. She looked at him then. He looked tired. Not weak. Never weak. But the pain had returned around his mouth, drawn tight from the brace, the stress, the hours of refusing to let anyone see too much. Isabella lowered her voice. You need to leave this room. Marco stepped forward. Don Alessio will leave. When the investigation... He needs to leave now, Isabella said. Marco stared at her. Several guards did too. No one gave medical instructions to Alessio Moretti's family. Apparently, Isabella Romano did. She continued before fear caught up. His brace was tampered with. I adjusted it enough for him to sit through the emergency. Not enough for hours of interrogation. The lower hinge is pulling again. Alessio watched her. You noticed from there? Your left hand keeps pressing the armrest every time. You shift. You are hiding it badly. Valentina made a sound suspiciously close to delight. Marco looked at Alessio. She is right. Alessio said nothing. Isabella held his gaze. You told everyone she was wrong when they called you weak. Do not prove them right by refusing care just because they are watching. The ballroom inhaled. Alessio Moretti, feared by families, obeyed by killers, hated by rivals, stared at the woman in silver who had just challenged his pride in front of everyone. Then he said, Fine. One word. The room nearly collapsed from shock. Valentina smiled openly now. I want her at all family meetings. Alessio ignored his mother, but not Isabella. You will come with me. Isabella blinked. Me? You understand the brace. I am not a nurse. Neither are the frightened men who fastened it wrong. She looked around. Every face watched. Some with jealousy, some with resentment, some with awe. Livia stood among them, crying silently, no longer the center of the room. Isabella wanted to refuse because accepting would make everything larger, more dangerous, less deniable. But Alessio's face was pale beneath his olive skin, and she had never been able to ignore pain just because pride stood in front of it. All right, she said. Marco cleared a path. Alessio wheeled himself toward the private corridor, refusing to let anyone push him. Isabella walked beside him, holding the small medical kit a guard had produced. Halfway to the doors, Carlo Viscari suddenly broke free from two guards near the west entrance, bloody-lipped and furious. No one knew how. He had gotten loose. Later, Marco would blame a nervous young guard. In that moment, Carlo only saw Isabella. You ruined everything, you fat little saint, he snarled, lunging toward her with a broken champagne stem in his hand. Isabella froze. Alessio did not. He turned his chair sharply into Carlo's path, blocking him. The movement sent visible pain through his body, but he did not stop. Carlo collided with the side of the chair, stumbled, and Marco tackled him from behind. The broken glass skittered across the marble and stopped at Isabella's feet. The entire ballroom erupted in screams. Alessio's face had gone white. Isabella dropped to her knees beside him, not in humiliation this time, in fury. I told you not to twist. Alessio breathed through clenched teeth. He was coming for you. And now you may have damaged the hinge again. You are welcome. She glared at him. For one absurd second in the middle of blood, scandal, and armed men, Alessio, Moretti almost smiled. Then the pain struck harder, and his body tightened. Isabella turned to the guards. Private room, now. No one argued. In the suite beyond the ballroom, away from the chandeliers and judgment, Alessio finally allowed Marco and another man to help him transfer to a leather medical chair designed for his needs. Isabella turned her back during the transfer without being asked, giving him privacy the way others had denied him dignity. When Marco said it was done, she faced him again. The room was quieter than the ballroom, lined with dark wood and old paintings. Rain had begun tapping against the tall windows, though the evening had started clear. Alessio sat with his injured leg extended, jaw tight, hands resting on the chair arms. The brace hinge was indeed twisted slightly. Isabella knelt again, but this time no one laughed. Marco handed her the tools. "Tell me what you need." Isabella looked up at him. The same man who had almost stopped her earlier now waited for her instructions. Warm cloth, small screwdriver. Not that one, the narrower one. And someone call whoever fitted this brace originally. Alessio said, "He retired." Then unretire him by phone. Valentina, who had followed them in, laughed softly. "I adore her." Isabella focused on the brace before anyone could see her blush. Her hands were steadier now. She loosened the strap, adjusted the hinge carefully, and checked the damaged lock. Alessio remained silent, but his breathing changed as the pressure eased. "Better?" she asked. "Yes." "That sounded painful." I said yes. "You said it like an insult." Marco coughed to hide a laugh. Alessio looked at him. Marco looked at the wall. Isabella finished the adjustment and sat back on her heels. "The lock needs replacing. This will hold for tonight if you don't. Try to throw yourself in front of any more angry cousins. He had glass. You have guards. They were late. Then replace them, not your spine." Silence followed. Isabella's face went hot as she realized what she had said. "I'm sorry." Alessio leaned forward slightly. "Do not apologize for telling the truth." His voice was quieter now. "Private." She looked at her hands. "People usually prefer it softened. People prefer lies that do not require them to change." Valentina stepped back toward the door. "Marco, come, let them speak." Isabella's head snapped up. "No, that is not necessary." Valentina looked amused. "My dear, necessary is not the point." She left with Marco, closing the door behind them. Isabella was suddenly alone with the most dangerous man she had ever touched. The rain thickened against the windows. Alessio watched her for a long moment. "You are afraid?" "A little." "Of me?" She considered lying, then remembered how poorly lies had served everyone tonight. "Not exactly." "Then what?" "Of what happens when I walk back into that ballroom." His gaze held hers. "You will not walk back alone." The words were simple. They unsettled her anyway. "Don Alessio, you don't owe me anything. I owe you my dignity." Her throat tightened. "No. You kept that yourself." His eyes changed. Isabella looked down quickly, but he had already seen the tears. She hated crying in front of powerful people. Tears always gave them something to use. Alessio did not move closer. He did not demand explanation. He waited. That made the tears harder to stop. "My father hated when people fussed over him," she said after a while. "After the accident, he wanted everyone to act normal. So they did, too well. At restaurants, if his brace hurt, people pretended not to see. At family parties, if he needed help standing, everyone looked away because they thought that respected his pride. But it made him lonely." Alessio's face went still. Isabella wiped her cheek. "Tonight, when everyone looked away from you, I saw him." Rain whispered against the glass. Alessio's voice was rougher when he spoke. "My fiancé left after the shooting." Isabella looked up. He continued, eyes on the window now. Not immediately. That would have made her look cruel. She stayed 3 months, smiled for photographs, spoke of devotion. Then one morning, she sent her father to return the ring. He told my mother she could not be expected to tie herself to half a man. Isabella inhaled sharply. Alessio's mouth hardened. "After that, I made rules. No one touched the chair. No one touched the brace. No one helped unless ordered. Pride is easier than humiliation, because at least pride feels chosen." Isabella understood that so deeply it hurt. But it becomes another kind of prison. He looked at her. "Yes." Neither spoke for a while. Then Alessio reached toward the small table and picked up the black envelope. They chose you because they thought you were unprotected. Isabella gave a humorless smile. They were not entirely wrong. They are now. She looked at him. You cannot just decide. That, I can. That is not how life works for normal people. I have never been accused of being normal. Despite everything, she laughed. It was small, but real. Alessio watched it as if it were something rare. Come to dinner tomorrow, he said. Isabella's laugh faded. What? Dinner. My mother will attend for the first 10 minutes. Pretend she is not listening for the next 20, then leave after deciding whether you are eating enough. Don Alessio. Alessio. She froze. I shouldn't call you that. You adjusted my brace and insulted my medical decisions. I think we have passed titles. Her heart beat too fast. I don't belong in your world. Neither do most people in my world. People will say you asked because of gratitude. People say many stupid things before breakfast. She looked at him helplessly. Why? He did not answer. Quickly. She appreciated that. Because when every polished person in that ballroom saw my chair before they saw me, you saw the pain I was hiding and still spoke to me like a man. Not a tragedy. Not a monster. Not a throne with wheels. A man. Isabella's eyes filled again. And because, he added, you said no to Carlo's apology. She blinked. That mattered? Yes. Why? Because you knew you deserved better before you believed anyone would give it to you. She looked away. That compliment went somewhere too tender. A knock sounded before she had to answer. Marco opened the door. The police are arriving for the public version. Salvi is secured. Carlo is secured. The waiter will live. Livia Romano is asking to speak to Isabella. Isabella closed her eyes. Alessio's voice was cool. No. Isabella opened her eyes. Wait. He looked at her. You do not owe her comfort. I know. Do you? She thought about that. Did she? Or did she only know it because he had said it? Either way, she wanted to choose for herself. I don't owe her comfort, Isabella said slowly. But I want to hear what she says when she is not performing. Alessio nodded to Marco. Bring her. Livia entered moments later without her earlier glow. Her perfect hair had loosened, mascara smudged beneath one eye, black dress wrinkled, at the waist. For the first time in years, she looked like Isabella's cousin instead of a woman from a magazine. She stopped when she saw Isabella beside Alessio, not kneeling now, not small. Bella, she whispered. Isabella stood. Say what you came to say. Livia's lips trembled. I am sorry. Isabella waited. Livia swallowed. Not because I got caught. Not because he defended you. I mean, yes, I'm afraid, but... She looked down, ashamed. I let them talk about you because it made me feel safer. If they were laughing at you, they weren't judging me. I told myself you didn't care because you always smiled. Isabella's voice was soft. I smiled because no one protected me when I didn't. Livia began to cry. I know. No, Isabella said. You didn't. But now you do. Livia nodded, trembling. Can you forgive me? Once, Isabella would have said yes immediately. She would have opened her arms. She would have made the room comfortable again. Instead, she looked at Alessio's brace, at the damaged lock, at the black envelope, at the cousin who had called her something like an assistant. Not tonight, she said. Livia covered her mouth. Isabella's voice shook, but held. Tonight, I am going to forgive myself for letting people treat me like a spare part. You can wait. Livia broke into quiet sobs. Valentina, standing in the doorway, looked at Isabella with open approval. Alessio looked as if he had just watched someone win a war without a weapon. Livia left without arguing. When the doors closed, again, Isabella exhaled. That was harder than adjusting your brace. You did well. I feel terrible. That does not mean you were wrong. By the time they returned to the ballroom, the story had changed. The guests no longer whispered with amusement. They whispered with caution. Salvi and Carlo were gone. Police waited in the lobby to receive the version of events the Morettis allowed the public to have. Livia stood with her mother, crying quietly. The elegant women who had laughed at Isabella's dress now looked away when she entered. Alessio wheeled himself to the center of the ballroom with Isabella walking beside him. Not behind, not near the wall. Beside him. Valentina stood on his other side. Marco followed a step behind. The image alone silenced the room. Alessio raised his voice just enough. Tonight, a man tampered with my brace to humiliate me. Another tried to frame an innocent woman because he believed no one would defend her. Both men were wrong. His gaze moved slowly over the guests. Many of you watched my pain and chose politeness over courage. Isabella Romano did not. Isabella's cheeks burned. Alessio continued. Many of you heard Carlo insult her and waited to see whether I would allow it. I did not. Carlo's friends lowered their eyes. Many of you would have believed the envelope in her purse because it was easier than questioning your own contempt. The room went still. Remember this. The person you dismiss is often the person who sees the knife before it reaches your cell. Back. Isabella's throat tightened. Alessio turned his chair slightly toward her. In front of everyone, he took her hand. Gasps moved through the ballroom, not because he touched a woman, because he touched her with respect. Isabella Romano is under my protection. Valentina cleared her throat. Alessio's mouth tightened. Then he added, and my invitation. Isabella looked down at him. Invitation? Dinner, he said quietly. Tomorrow. The ballroom watched. Livia watched. Marco watched. Valentina watched with satisfaction. Isabella could feel the old fear trying to rise. The fear of being too visible, too judged, too much. But then she looked at Alessio Moretti, the paralyzed Italian mafia boss everyone had abandoned until she did the unthinkable, and saw not a broken man or a dangerous throne, but someone who knew what it meant to be looked at incorrectly by the entire world. Yes, she said. The room heard it. Alessio's eyes softened. Not much. Just enough for her. Good. Weeks later, people would still tell the story badly. They would say the chubby woman won the mafia boss by kneeling at his feet. They would say Alessio Moretti chose her out of gratitude. They would say she was lucky he noticed her. But that was not the truth. Isabella had not won him by kneeling. She had stood up to his pride. She had refused a false apology. She had seen the pain everyone else politely ignored. Alessio had not chosen her because she was grateful or convenient, or easy to protect. He chose her because she spoke truth in rooms where everyone else performed loyalty. Their lives did not become simple. Salvi's betrayal opened doors to older enemies. Carlo's humiliation became a family wound. Livia's apology took months to become action. Isabella still had days when cruel voices from the past found their way into mirrors. Alessio still had nights when pain made him silent and pride made him difficult. But real love did not begin because two people were healed. It began because they stopped pretending not to see each other's wounds. On the night of their first private dinner, Isabella arrived in a navy dress she already owned. No rented silver, no borrowed confidence. Alessio waited by the window, his brace properly repaired, his wheelchair angled toward the city lights. You came, he said. You invited me. People often refuse me. Do they? Not usually out loud. Isabella smiled. Then they are missing the fun. He looked at her for a long moment. Then slowly he laughed. It was quiet, rusted from disuse, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with softness. Valentina, listening from the hallway as promised, whispered loudly, "Marry her eventually, but do not frighten her tonight." Isabella covered her mouth. Alessio closed his eyes. "Mama." From the hallway came the sound of his mother walking away, cane tapping victory against the floor. Isabella laughed then, fully. Alessio watched her as if the sound eased something deeper than pain. Months later, the ballroom where it began hosted another Moretti charity gala. This time, Isabella did not stand near the wall. She entered beside Alessio in a dark emerald gown, not because she needed to look thinner or richer or sharper, but because she liked the color, and Alessio had once said green made her eyes look like old glass in sunlight. People stared, some with admiration, some with envy, some with the discomfort of those forced to respect someone they once dismissed. Isabella no longer smiled to protect them. She smiled when she meant it. Halfway through the evening, Alessio's brace strap shifted slightly, not dangerously, not dramatically, enough that his hand tightened on the armrest. Around them, several people noticed and froze, haunted by the memory of the last gala. Isabella leaned down and said, "May I?" Alessio looked at her. The old pride flickered, but it no longer ruled him. Yes. She adjusted the strap quickly, gracefully, without shame. No one laughed, no one whispered. And when she straightened, Alessio took her hand before the room could decide what it meant. This time, Isabella did not blush. She stood beside him, as if she belonged there. Because she did. The rejected woman in the silver gown had done the unthinkable. She had crossed a ballroom no one else dared to cross. She had touched pain hidden beneath power. She had refused to accept crumbs of respect from people who offered cruelty in polished voices, and the Italian mafia boss who trusted no one had seen her clearly. Not as charity, not as weakness, not as the woman everyone abandoned, as the one person brave enough to stay when pride made him impossible to help. That was why, when people asked Alessio Moretti why he chose Isabella Romano, he never mentioned the brace first. He never mentioned the envelope, or Carlo, or Salvi, or the scandal. He only said, "Because everyone else saw my chair, she saw me." And Isabella, when asked why she chose him, gave an answer that made Valentina smile every time. "Because everyone else saw my body," she said. "He saw my courage." And in a world that had tried to make both of them smaller in different ways, that was enough to begin forever.